Imagine this. Your entire family, 2 adults, 2 kids, lives in an apartment the size of a 2-car garage. 300 square feet. By American standards, it's a tiny storage locker. By 1960s Soviet standards, it was the peak of luxury. Millions of people fought in lines for years just to get a chance to live here. This is the story of the Khrushchevka, a temporary communist experiment designed to disintegrate after 25 years that became the permanent home for generations. To understand why people wept over 30 square meters, you have to understand what came before. In the 1940s and early 1950s, Soviet cities were in crisis. The war had destroyed millions of homes. Factories were running at full capacity. Workers poured into cities from every corner of the country. There was nowhere to put them. The solution was brutal and simple: compression. The state packed multiple families into apartments built for 1, 3 families in 4 rooms, strangers sharing a kitchen, a bathroom, a hallway. This was the kommunalka, the communal apartment.
In Leningrad in 1965, more than half of all apartment residents still lived in them. Not from choice. There was simply no alternative. By 1953, Stalin was dead. The new leadership had to make a choice: keep millions of people crammed into shared apartments with strangers, or build something fast. They chose fast. In 1955, Nikita Khrushchev stood before Soviet architects and delivered a speech that ended an era. The Stalinist style, grand facades, high ceilings, ornate details, was over. The new word was without frills. The Khrushchevka was not designed by architects. It was engineered like a product. Prefabricated concrete panels, made in factories, transported to sites, assembled on location. One building block took 12 days to erect. The first series, called the K7, was assembled from fewer than 24 different components. Journalists called it the Kalashnikov of housing. Mass-produced, simple, and effective enough.
The walls were thin. Sound insulation was virtually non-existent. In practice, that meant you could hear your neighbor's television, their arguments, their alarm clock. No elevator. That was not a cost-cutting mistake. Soviet health and safety regulations set 5 stories as the maximum height for a building without an elevator, so every Khrushchevka had exactly 5 floors. 25 years. That was the designed lifespan. Build them fast, house the people, replace them later. That was the plan. Moving day in 1965. A family of 4 carries their belongings into a 2-room apartment on the 3rd floor. 44 square meters, about 470 square feet. Their own front door, their own bathroom. No strangers. Here is how a typical family of 4 lived in that space. The children got the bedroom. The parents slept in the living room, on a sofa bed that folded out every night and folded back every morning. That sofa was also the couch where guests sat. When company came over, the family would pull out a folding table from behind the wardrobe and set it up in the middle of the room. Everyone squeezed together on that same sofa, on the armrests on folding chairs brought in from the kitchen. The kitchen, just 65 square feet, the exact size of a walk-in closet where Americans store their winter coats. In the corner, a tiny table. 2 people could sit comfortably. If 4 people sat down, nobody could move. To let someone out, 2 others had to stand up and tuck in their chairs. The bathroom, and this is important, was actually 2 separate rooms. The toilet in one tiny closet, the bath and sink in another. It sounds like a luxury. In a Khrushchevka, the toilet room was barely big enough to close the door. The sink was in the bathroom, not the toilet. The walls were so thin that life in a Khrushchevka was a performance with an audience. Families learned the rhythms of neighbors they never chose. The man upstairs who walked heavily at midnight. The couple next door whose arguments followed a familiar script. And yet, nobody wanted to go back. A thin wall with a stranger was still better than a shared kitchen with one. Now guess, How much did it cost to buy an apartment like this? The answer is exactly $0. You couldn't buy it even if you had the money. Instead, you paid with your life. To get the keys, you had to register on a government waiting list and work faithfully at the same state-owned factory or institute for 7 to 10 years. You didn't sign a mortgage, you signed a lease of loyalty with the state. Once you finally got in, your monthly bill was around 5 rubles. At the official exchange rate, that was about $7. It wasn't rent in the Western sense. It was a heavily subsidized fee for utilities and maintenance. At just 3% of the average Soviet income, it was a bill people barely noticed. But here is what that cheap bill didn't show. That apartment was not yours. You did not own it. You did not rent it in any Western sense of the word. The state issued you a document called an order. It gave you the right to live there, for life, but not to own. You could not sell it. You could not gift it. You could not legally rent it to someone else. The apartment belonged to the state, or to the factory where you worked. You could exchange it for another apartment, often with unofficial payments passed in envelopes. And you could pass it on to a family member who was registered there when you died. That was the extent of your rights. And there was no alternative. Private real estate did not exist. Cooperative apartments existed, but they required thousands of rubles up front, more than 2 years' salary. For ordinary citizens, the state-controlled queue was the only path. The Khrushchevka was designed to be a temporary fix, built to last just 25 years. But that deadline passed in the early 1980s, and the buildings kept standing. They outlived the Soviet Union itself. Today, millions of people across the former Soviet bloc still call them home, making a quarter-century experiment last for over 70 years.
Yet to understand the true legacy of these concrete blocks, you have to look past the grim, aging facades. You have to step back into the 1960s, stand in that tiny doorway, and see it through the eyes of a Soviet family. To them, it wasn't a drab concrete box. It was a palace. It gave them something almost impossible to explain to anyone who has never lived without it: privacy. The simple dignity of knowing no stranger would walk through your room. The freedom to cook a meal without fighting over a stove with another family. You couldn't own it, you couldn't sell it, you could hear every single sound your neighbor made through the thin walls, but it was yours in the only way that truly mattered. You could finally close the door and lock the outside world away. And for 60 million people, that was more than enough.